My life was meticulously scheduled. Unknown to me, so was my betrayal. Each week, while I believed we were a perfect family, my wife met secretly with her old flame, her true partner, in deceit. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, the very days I worked late, were their rendezvous for treachery. I was the unwitting financier of their escapades under the guise of a loving marriage. The facade shattered when the bitter truth emerged, not only about their betrayal, but also the paternity of the child I cherished. Armed with this harsh reality, I'm now on a path to reclaim my life and seek justice. This is my story of deception unraveled and the quest for redemption. Enjoy watching it.
Ever since I was little, I've loved rocket engines. Whenever there was a space shuttle or rocket launch, I couldn't take my eyes off the TV. The powerful explosions that lifted those rockets fascinated me. After getting my bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering at Georgia Tech, I started working on my master's degree. Growing up in a middle-class family, becoming a rocket scientist was my dream. My parents helped with tuition, and I took out student loans for everything else. I was known as a hard worker at college, which I was proud of. I didn't really date much at university. I was in a fraternity, but I wasn't the typical sporty type that girls usually like. Last week, I noticed a girl who used to sit with a guy now sitting alone in the cafeteria, smiling at me shyly. It was nice to get smiles from a girl, but I wasn't really looking to date. Then, one day, she came over and introduced herself as Sharon Appleby. I told her I was Keith Carlisle and asked how she knew so much about me. She said she had been wanting to talk to me and had learned about me to start a conversation. Sharon was studying philosophy and art at Georgia Tech. She said she had been thinking about me a lot. We laughed and chatted. She told me about her past relationships and how they made her rethink her life goals. Sharon told me she admired my honesty and dedication and that she liked me. She wanted us to get to know each other better. Just as we were getting closer, I decided to surprise her with flowers at her dorm. When I knocked, a guy opened the door. Confused, I asked if Sharon was there. Sharon appeared, dressed up, and seemed nervous. I asked who the guy was. She explained he was Wesley Stanton, her roommate in the mixed-gender dorm. They were both philosophy majors and got along well, which is why they chose to live together. Wesley jumped in to clear the air, saying there was nothing to worry about. He explained he preferred men and that Sharon was just trying to respect his privacy. He assured me that if Sharon cared about me as she said, then I must be a good guy too. Wesley then showed me their room, decorated with posters of famous philosophers like Aristotle and Plato. They both loved discussing philosophy and applying it to life. After the initial shock, we all started talking more openly. I'm sorry I didn't tell you earlier, Keith, but it wasn't my secret to share. I couldn't do that to a friend. Are these flowers for me? They're beautiful. Thank you. Wesley, can you put them in water for me, please? Keith and I are about to go out and I don't want to delay. On our walk, she did her best to calm me. She took my hand and asked, "Are you okay, Keith? Does it bother you that my roommate is a guy? Wesley hears me talk about you all the time. He knows how much I care about you. I love you, Keith, and I don't want anything to come between us, especially not my neighbor. If you want, I can change roommates or move to a room with another girl. I'd miss my friend, though. He's been a great support before you came along." I thought about what they both said, and it made sense. She even offered to change her living situation to make me comfortable. This showed how much she cared. I was also impressed that she stood up for Wesley. After thinking it over, I trusted our relationship fully. She was clear about being committed to me. I decided to be the best person she believed I was. Don't worry about it, dear. I'm fine with Wesley being your roommate. It just surprised me, that's all. I don't want to upset you by separating you from a good friend. I have friends I discuss complex topics with, and their gender doesn't matter. We're all just nerds who love the same stuff. Thanks for considering it, though. It means a lot. After that, Sharon only brought up Wesley if I asked. I'd see them at school sometimes, but I didn't think much of it. I saw Wesley with other guys too, which confirmed what Sharon told me. Sharon was always practical and straightforward. Her thoughtful approach was a big part of who she was. Sometimes her logical nature was a bit much, but I got used to it. Before we knew it, graduation was near. I proposed to Sharon and she said yes. Her only condition was that Wesley be one of my groomsmen. I agreed, but asked her to make sure he didn't flirt with anyone. She laughed and promised to talk to him about it. We planned to marry after graduation. I never got very close to Wesley, despite his close relationship with Sharon. Despite this, I excelled in my studies and earned my master's degree in aerospace engineering. Sharon and Wesley graduated with degrees in philosophy and art. Sharon told me Wesley almost didn't pass his exams. Without her help, he might have had to repeat the year. I thought he was lazy, but I never said this to Sharon. He stayed her loyal friend even after we married. I didn't expect him to find a good job with his philosophy degree, especially with his poor grades. But his future was secure. Sharon later revealed that Wesley knew he would inherit a fortune from his parents. This probably explained why he wasn't very motivated. I met Nate Perkins and Doug Bradley at industry events. They worked for companies making NASA's new rocket engines. Impressed by my passion and knowledge, they recommended me for a job. After 3 interviews, I was hired to work at Aerojet Rocketdyne in Rancho Cordova, California. My starting salary was $175,000 a year, with bonuses for good project outcomes. I was part of a team developing engines for a mission to Mars. This job was a dream come true. After our wedding and honeymoon, a realtor found us a perfect 5-bedroom house. You might think 5 bedrooms is a lot, but we plan ahead. I pictured having 2 or 3 kids, leaving room for guests or a home office. We also wanted space for our parents to visit. We were sad to leave them, but Sharon fully supported my career move. I really admire her for that. She embraced our new life in California enthusiastically. With her degree, job options for Sharon were limited, but my salary was good. She managed our home perfectly, cooked my favorite meals, and made sure I was happy. I was indeed a happy man. I was surprised one evening 3 months after our wedding when I came home and found Wesley visiting. "Hello, dear," she greeted me with a kiss. "Dinner's nearly ready. Wesley stopped by to catch up on old times. Why don't you take a shower and we can all chat during dinner?" I greeted Wesley, though a bit hesitantly, and went to freshen up. As I showered, I wondered why Wesley was at our house. I hoped he wouldn't ask to stay over and disrupt our evening plans. After my shower, I found the dinner table set for 3, and Sharon seemed really happy. As she served my favorite dishes, she mentioned, "Isn't it nice having Wesley over? He just popped in unexpectedly." She enjoyed talking about philosophy with him again. "You know I love that you're not into philosophy like him. It's like how you know I'm not into rocket science," she added. I acknowledged it was nice they could catch up. I asked Wesley what brought him to town. He explained that his philosophy degree wasn't very useful for a career, and Sharon hadn't found much work in her field here either. "Rancho Cordova isn't a big place," he said. Sharon had decided to be a housewife for now and was enjoying it. "She's really happy," he added. Wesley said he didn't want to return to school, even though he could teach if he finished his master's and doctorate. "You both loved philosophy," I reminded him. He then mentioned his artistic side and shared that he'd landed a job at a local studio that creates children's book illustrations. "They hired me right after seeing my sketches," he exclaimed. Sharon was thrilled, calling it a wonderful coincidence. Despite my sarcastic comment about fate, Sharon was excited that Wesley would be nearby to discuss philosophy. Wesley looked forward to having someone to talk to about deep topics. "I'd love to visit if Keith doesn't mind," he suggested. Feeling a bit cornered, I knew Sharon wanted to keep in touch with Wesley for intellectual conversations. I wanted to support her happiness. "We'd be happy to see you occasionally, Wesley. Just let us know ahead of time," I said. Sharon then explained that Wesley needed a place to stay temporarily since his housing wasn't settled yet. "Could he stay with us while he finds an apartment?" she asked. Despite my reservations, I agreed since they had a long history as roommates. "Sure, he can stay," I agreed. "Sharon, maybe start with the realtor we used?" She thought it was a great idea, and Wesley stayed with us for 5 nights before moving into his own place. While Wesley was with us, our routine was a bit disrupted, but that was okay. 2 weeks later, he moved into his apartment nearby. Sharon always asked before inviting him over, usually about 3 times a month. When Sharon told me she was pregnant, I was overjoyed. The ultrasound revealed we were having a girl. I was nervous at my first few OB appointments as the delivery date neared. We only disagreed on the name. She wanted to name our daughter Cheryl Diane Carlisle because she always loved that name and wanted it for our first daughter. I wanted to name her after both our mothers, but she didn't agree. Since she was doing most of the work, I decided to let her choose. The name wasn't as important to me. I was just excited to spoil our daughter. The first time I held her, my heart was full of love. Wesley visited us at the hospital to celebrate. He wanted to keep the moment in Sharon's room for a bit and asked to take a photo with his phone, which I agreed to. He mentioned that Cheryl looked a lot like her mom, which made me happy and relieved. I joked that if she was like me, she might find it hard to get a boyfriend. Sharon's mom stayed with us the first week after we left the hospital, and my mom the next. If they had stayed longer, I wouldn't have had the chance to spoil Cheryl. They loved her so much. Our first Christmas with Cheryl was special because we still had 2 spare bedrooms. That Christmas, both sets of parents came over. They gave Cheryl lots of gifts, even though she was only 4 months old. I couldn't help but spend over $600 on gifts she won't remember, but it was worth it. We had a great time over the holidays. After everyone left, Wesley wanted to visit. Sharon had recovered well, so we agreed. Wesley shared some jokes with Sharon that I didn't get, and then played with Cheryl. He gave her a t-shirt that said, "It doesn't matter how slow you go, as long as you don't stop. Confucius." Sharon dressed Cheryl in it right away. Wesley thanked me for the visit and left another gift for Cheryl, saying he had kept it aside to not disrupt our family time. I started to see Wesley in a new light and respected him more. He had quietly left a gift for Cheryl. Later, I asked Sharon what it might be. She didn't know, but mentioned Wesley had sent the photo I took of him with Cheryl to his parents. I had met them a few times in college. They saw me as Wesley's best friend. Wesley said his parents loved the photo and wanted to give Cheryl a Christmas gift. He explained that his parents were sad because they thought they might not have biological grandchildren since Wesley might adopt if he married a man. They began to see Cheryl as a kind of surrogate grandchild. Sharon and I figured out the t-shirt was from Wesley and the wrapped gift from his parents. Curious, I urged Sharon to open it. Inside was a set of coins from the year Cheryl was born, including rare silver and gold ones, all from the US Mint. The collection was worth over $20,000. I was shocked and told Sharon, "What should we do with such an expensive gift for our 4-month-old?" I asked. "It depends," she replied, "on how you see it." I worried about what such wealthy people might expect in return. Sharon explained they were incredibly wealthy and that for them, giving such gifts was normal, like buying a stroller. Trying to return it would offend them and might harm our friendship with Wesley. She suggested writing a nice thank you note and saving the gift for Cheryl when she's older. After thinking it over, I realized Sharon was right. I never considered how easy it was for them to give because of their wealth. If I were that wealthy, I'd want to be just as generous. Why not? Besides, they didn't give anything to Sharon or me, only to Cheryl. Since it was Christmas, I decided to be okay with it and told her so, but she mentioned something else that got me thinking. Why did you say that? The t-shirt Wesley gave her was probably all he could afford. Don't artists make a lot of money? I asked. She laughed and said, "Yes, famous artists do make a lot of money, just like skilled painters. But Wesley works with a team drawing for children's books, not by himself," she explained. "He told me he makes about $45,000 a year. Here in California, his rent and bills take up most of that. He's not exactly living paycheck to paycheck, but it's close. Please don't mention his salary. It might embarrass him." I didn't know Wesley wasn't well off. He could have lived somewhere cheaper than California, but he wanted to stay close to his parents in Sacramento. I felt my relationship with Sharon was growing stronger. She was a wonderful wife and mother and loved Cheryl deeply. We settled into a regular schedule for intimacy. When Cheryl started toddling, it was clear she was Daddy's girl. Every time I came home, she'd run to me arms open, covering me with kisses. I loved it. Sharon was puzzled by Cheryl's attachment to me since she spent all day with her. Maybe absence does make the heart grow fonder. Sharon once nearly accused me of turning Cheryl against her, but had no examples to prove it. While I couldn't explain Cheryl's affection for me, I secretly enjoyed it. Wesley's parents kept spoiling Cheryl with gifts. Wesley updated them with photos after each visit. I reminded myself that Cheryl benefited from their generosity, and I didn't want to stop that. Sharon asked if I'd mind Wesley's parents being Cheryl's godparents since they were so generous. I agreed after some thought. "Sharon, I'm curious about Wesley," I said one day. "You talk a lot when he visits or calls. How's his personal life?" She told me they talked about many things, including his personal life. Wesley felt he hadn't met someone who met his high standards for a partner. "What kind of person is he looking for?" I asked. Her answer surprised me. "He's looking for someone like you, Keith. He respects how you treat us and manage everything. He's met many good people, but none compare to you." "Don't tell him I told you, but he said if you weren't married, he'd pursue you. He loves our kids because they're yours," she said with a big smile. I was uncomfortable with that thought. "I hope you let him know I'm not interested," I said. "Of course," she grinned, "but it amuses me how much he likes you. I told him he needs to look elsewhere." She chuckled. That made me more cautious around Wesley. I didn't want to give him any wrong ideas. Just before Cheryl's second birthday, Sharon gave birth to our twins, a boy and a girl. I wanted to name the boy after myself. Sharon was against it, mentioning how much Wesley disliked being named after his father because it tied him to his family's expectations. "He doesn't hate his parents, he just wants his own identity," she explained. "I want our son to have my name." "But he'll have your last name, Carlisle. Isn't that enough?" she asked. "I like my name, and I think our son will too," I argued. "Let me name him." She thought for a moment, then offered, "If you let me name the girl, I'll agree to put Keith in his name. How about Conrad Keith Carlisle and Jocelyn Edwina Carlisle? Do we have a deal?" I didn't want to fight over names. I liked Jocelyn for our daughter, so I agreed. We signed the birth certificates, settling it. Little did I know it was a small victory. She always called him Conrad while I called him Keith. But since she spent more time with him, my influence was limited. Keith never responded to the name Keith, but always turned when called Conrad. Every time I came home, Cheryl ran to me, now calling me Daddy, which warmed my heart. Her kisses became gentler, no longer covering my face like a paintbrush. I adored this girl. Conrad and Jocelyn kept Sharon busy in their early years, and I didn't think much about the Stantons since Wesley hadn't found a partner or adopted a child yet. They asked to be godparents to the twins, and I couldn't deny them the chance to spoil my children on birthdays and Christmas. Sharon remained vibrant and lively, especially on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. She told me she felt more energetic after the kids started school. When the twins were 6 and Cheryl was 8, I was deeply involved in a work project. I was leading the development of a new type of engine that could travel to orbit and beyond without losing its boosters. This project took up most of my weekends, which I hated, but Sharon understood my commitment to our family's future. The Stantons invited Sharon and the kids to spend weekends on their 120-feet yacht in San Pablo Bay while I worked. This arrangement allowed them to bond with their godchildren, and the kids loved these adventures. Although I missed them, it let me work late without distractions. During the week, I made it home by 9 p.m. to see the kids before bedtime. Cheryl always waited to kiss me goodnight. I cherished those moments. Later, I learned that the kids called the Stantons Grandma and Grandpa because of their close bond and frequent trips together. Sharon felt it was a kind title, especially since they were also generous godparents. No matter how late I worked, Sharon was always attentive to my needs, which I increasingly appreciated as the Stantons became more involved in our lives. Every year, I had to attend week-long expos, which were boring for Sharon and the kids. The Stantons often took them on exciting trips instead. Whether it was a Disney cruise or an exotic location, they always returned with wonderful stories. Despite meeting the Stantons briefly, they never accepted our invitations to dinner, preferring to keep a distance perhaps because our modest home couldn't compare to their mansion. However, there was never any open criticism from either side. As the children grew older, Conrad and Jocelyn needed their mom's help with schoolwork. But Cheryl insisted on waiting for me, no matter how late I returned. Despite Sharon's concerns that this was too stressful for me, I reassured Cheryl that helping her was my joy. The kids grew quickly, and I couldn't have been happier with my family life. I was especially close to Cheryl, proud of all my children, but there was a special bond between us. Sharon was upset because she felt she had spent more time with Cheryl than I had, but Cheryl was clearly closer to me. I thought it was because of my genes, but Sharon thought the same. Cheryl was very smart and even skipped a grade because of her intelligence. When she was 17, she asked me to help pick out a prom dress. I chose a stylish yet bold dress that impressed everyone. I warned her date to treat her well, although I was annoyed that Wesley wanted a photo with her before prom. I stayed quiet for Sharon's sake since they were still friends. A couple of days after graduation, Cheryl told me something surprising. "Dad, the Stantons offered to pay for my college if I study philosophy at Georgia Tech, like Mom and Wesley." I was shocked because Sharon hadn't mentioned this. Cheryl didn't want to study philosophy, but Sharon was pushing her because it would help financially. Cheryl was worried about getting a degree she didn't want and being a financial burden. I reassured her, "Honey, our finances are fine. It's not up to the Stantons to pay for your education. I've saved enough for you to study whatever and wherever you want." She was relieved and hugged me, saying she wanted to study engineering at Georgia Tech, like me. She sent me the login to her Georgia Tech account to pay her fees. I paid for all 4 years right away, proud of her choice. My wife later confronted me, "Did you pay for Cheryl's engineering degree?" She was upset because she had wanted Cheryl to study philosophy, thinking it would please Cheryl's godparents. I argued that Sharon had tried to force that path on Cheryl without telling me. "You're trying to fix things with Wesley instead of respecting our daughter's choice," I said. Sharon insisted that the Stantons, whom she referred to as grandparents, wanted to pay as a kind gesture. I made it clear that it was my responsibility as her father to fund Cheryl's education, not the Stantons. "I will do the same for our other children when it's their turn." Sharon didn't understand my point, as if I was completely missing something obvious. I didn't have her deep understanding of philosophy. For her, it was simple. The Stantons were richer than us, so she thought we should let them pay for things. I just couldn't think like that. Frustrated, she left, thinking I couldn't grasp her point of view. She always felt she understood things better. In this situation, I was fine if she thought I was old-fashioned. The next week, we attended Cheryl's graduation. The Stantons, Wesley, and our families all took lots of photos. Sharon's parents and my parents came, and we were all proud of Cheryl, especially since she graduated with honors a year early. I had paid for her next tuition, and her mom and I gave her the best laptop and scientific calculators for her engineering classes. Cheryl hugged me tight and whispered, "Thank you. I love you forever, Dad. You're the best dad ever." I loved her so much. Wesley gave Cheryl a book about famous philosophers, which made Sharon tear up. Cheryl thanked him and set the book aside. Our parents gave her clothes and jewelry she loved. The Stantons gave her a new Audi R8 GT, which cost over $250,000. Cheryl was thrilled. But for me, it was all about celebrating Cheryl. She stuck by me all day, except when she drove the Audi. She wanted me to join her, but I suggested she take the twins instead, which she did. Sharon and the Stantons were disappointed I wasn't more excited about the car, but it was Cheryl's day. A few weeks later, I came home to an unusually quiet house. "Where is everyone?" I asked. Wesley had taken the kids to the marina on the Stantons' yacht. "Don't you usually go with them?" I asked. Sharon said she usually did, but not today. She wanted tonight to be special, even better than our honeymoon. Smiling, I asked, "What's the special occasion?" Sharon said she had been thinking about our life together and how grateful she was for me. She wanted to show her appreciation with a special dinner of all my favorite dishes. I didn't question my good fortune. The food was incredible. After dinner, we had a memorable evening. The next morning, I rushed to work after finding a note from Sharon saying she was with the kids. At work, Sharon texted me to come home on time. I joked about repeating last night but got no reply. We never broke our routine on Fridays, so I was curious about what she had planned. I was surprised to find a limousine outside when I got home. It wasn't anyone's birthday. Inside, the house was too quiet. "In the kitchen, Keith," Sharon called. She and Wesley sat across from me. "What's going on?" I asked. Sharon got straight to the point. Keith, I'm going to divorce you as soon as possible. Wesley and I are getting married the day it's official. The kids and I are leaving too. There's no chance of us getting back together. No hope? I was stunned. I thought you loved me. Is this some kind of joke? Today isn't April Fool's. Why? I was shocked. Over the years, I got used to you, Keith. You're like a comfortable old sweater, she said. But Wesley has always been my true love. He and I are meant to be together. She didn't use quotes from philosophers to explain, doubting I'd understand their deep connection. But you said Wesley loves men. When did that change? I asked. He just said that so you'd be okay with him being around, she explained. Our relationship never ended after college. We were always close, physically and emotionally. While I was at work, Sharon and Wesley were together every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoon. She spent the other days with me as a reward. On Sundays, she rested out of respect for us both. She never mixed the days she was with us. During holidays, Wesley and I stayed in the same room, and his parents looked after the kids. They knew about us from the start. Being apart was hard for us, which we're fixing today. If Wesley is your soulmate, why marry me and have kids with me? I asked. It made no sense. I can explain, Wesley started. Quiet! I don't want to hear from you, I yelled. This was between Sharon and me. Suddenly, two men rushed in, ready to step in if needed. Wesley gestured for them to back off. He suggested Sharon do the talking, noting my upset state. Keith, Wesley, and I consider ourselves truly married, spiritually united early in our relationship, Sharon explained. Our main issue was money. Philosophy degrees don't pay well, and Wesley's parents wouldn't give him money until they passed away. So they made a plan. Wesley chose me to be Sharon's temporary husband, to support her and the kids until he could inherit. I approached you, married you, and had you support me and the kids, Sharon continued. Our children? I questioned. She handed me DNA reports. No, Keith, none of the children are yours. They're Wesley's, she said coldly. The kids' names were from Wesley's family. She tore me apart without emotion. The reports confirmed it. I was devastated. My life was a lie. My emotions were in turmoil. I calmed myself, not wanting to show my pain. Anything to say, Keith? She pushed. I responded coldly, calling her by her maiden name. If you can't see who you are without my help, it's pointless, I said. She tried to dismiss moral concepts as old-fashioned. And the spoon ran away with the fork, I added sarcastically, implying the absurdity of her story. Enough, Miss Appleby. Why bring this up now? I asked. She hesitated, maintaining her composure. Wesley's parents died in a plane crash recently, she finally said. They were planning the funeral and hadn't told me until now. Wesley's parents owned a large part of a pharmaceutical company worth millions. At a board meeting, Wesley was named their heir, inheriting their fortune and taking a leading role in our family. She continued, Wesley planned to move with us to the Stanton Mansion in Dallas. The kids and I would go there for a funeral service, but you, Keith, are not invited. I don't want us to be enemies. You did your part honestly in our marriage, and we won't ask for anything from you in the divorce, not even the clothes on our backs. Wesley has already bought new clothes for us. We won't take anything you provided. Now that Wesley can fully support us, you can keep the house and cars. We've signed forms giving you everything. We'll only take personal gifts from Wesley and his parents. There's just one thing left to fix. Now, you know the children aren't biologically yours. We need you to sign these forms to end your parental rights so Wesley can adopt them and give them his name. Why adopt them if they are his biological kids? We thought about leaving your name off their birth certificates, but wanted to ensure your support. Wesley let you be named on the certificates, making you legally their dad. But really, you've been more like a stepfather. With this new chapter, it's time to change that. Wesley wants to pay you back for the money you spent on the kids. He'll give you $300,000 for each child, which adds up to $900,000. Plus, he'll return the $250,000 you put into Cheryl's college fund. That's $1,150,000 total if you sign these forms. It's convenient for you to ask me to sign away my rights to the children we raised. I took the check, looked at it, and ripped it up. Sharon was surprised. Does this mean you're giving up your rights without payment? No, Mrs. Appleby, I won't sign anything. Do the kids know what you're asking? Yes, they do. We told them a year ago about Wesley being their real dad. They were initially shocked, but then excited about the wealth they would inherit. I thought to myself about how all these revelations kept coming. Cheryl was always Daddy's girl, but I felt Sharon had pushed the twins away from me. Cheryl's pain hurt me more than anything Sharon could say or do. I don't trust you after all the lies. I need to hear from the kids that they want me to give up my rights so Wesley can adopt them. Wesley had Nate bring the kids in. They wore new clothes and started crying when they saw me, except Cheryl, who was silently crying. I asked the kids if they really wanted me to give up my rights so Wesley could adopt them. They nodded slowly. I felt devastated. I let out my anger. "Okay, Wesley, you want to negotiate? Here's my offer." Wesley tried to clarify, saying he was just reimbursing me for the kids' expenses. It's a lie. I have their birth certificates saying I'm their legal and biological father. You want to pay me to give up my rights. That's a transaction, so we're setting a price for something I'm selling, that's all. The children looked very unhappy with what I had said. They seemed like they were just being used for money. I wanted them to know they were being bought and sold. It wouldn't change what happened, but it made me feel a bit better to say it. "Let's finish this, Keith," said Mr. Stanton. "That's Mr. Carlyle to you," I replied. "Okay, Mr. Carlyle, how much money do you want to take care of these kids?" he asked. $3 million, $1 million each, and I'll throw in Sharon for free, I said, half joking. Sharon was clearly annoyed by my comment, but didn't say anything. "You must think highly of yourself to ask for $3 million, he remarked. "You think that's too much?" I asked. "No problem then, we're done here. These kids mean more to me than just $3 million, I declared. "Why aren't they worth $3 million to you?" I challenged him. He hesitated, looking around nervously, then finally agreed. $3.25 million, but that's my final offer, not a cent more. "You're buying the kids, not paying for Cheryl's college," I clarified. "She may not think I'm her dad, but she'll know I paid for her education," I stated. "Fine," he snapped. Nate, his assistant, was told to write the check. "I won't accept a check. I want the full payment first," I insisted. I showed them my bank account on my phone. "Transfer the $3 million and I'll sign everything." Wesley instructed Nate to make the transfer, and soon my account showed the full amount. "Now, Mr. Stanton, remember I had 2 conditions. You've only met one," I said. "You're testing my patience," he growled. "My second condition is for each child to tell me they love you more and want to be with you," I demanded. Sharon was furious. "This is cruel to ask of the kids," she exclaimed. "Cruel, like what you've done to me today," I retorted. The children then, one by one, told me they wanted to be with Wesley, each struggling with their emotions. Cheryl was the last, tears streaming down her face as she said she'd choose to be with her siblings and mother because they were 3 and I was just 1. Cheryl's refusal to say the exact words Wesley demanded showed her inner conflict. "She's confused. Let her go," Sharon pleaded, but Cheryl stood firm. "I won't say those words." Moved by her courage, I finally said, "That's enough. I've heard enough. I realized they made her choose and she chose them." My tears fell as I signed the documents, making it official. Nate quickly took them to finalize everything. Wesley dryly placed phones on the table side by side. "Mr. Gardner is Carlyle," he chuckled, handing me a legal order. "This requires you to stay away from me and my family. You can't come within 500 feet of us or contact us in any way. If you do, you'll end up in jail for contempt of court. We all have new phones and my kids are starting new lives. I demand you respect this." I took the order, tore it up, and replied, "Unnecessary. I hope to never see you again." I lied, hurting inside. "Now please leave my house." Wesley's last words were, "I'm sorry, you're a good guy. That's why I chose you. Good luck." Hurt, I snapped back. "Don't quit your day job to write condolences." My former family members left quietly. Overwhelmed, Cheryl sobbed loudly as she walked out, looking back at me. "I'm sorry. I love you, Dad. I will see you again," she cried before being hurried into a limousine. I collapsed, curled up, sobbing as my life fell apart. At that moment, I didn't care if I lived or died. I felt discarded by my entire family. I had been naive since the day I met Sharon, trapped in their deceitful schemes. These 2 were the most manipulative people I had ever met. It felt like a tsunami had hit me, leaving me drowning in despair. I mourned my family as if they had all suddenly died. Minutes later, I checked my watch. It had only been 30 minutes. I always believed you could be part of the problem or part of the solution. I decided it was better to work through the pain and be part of the solution. I pushed aside my emotions and thought about how to move forward. Now, without a wife and children, I was a free man facing an uncertain future. The song, "I Will Survive" by Gloria Gaynor popped into my head. Wesley and Sharon had all the money they needed now, able to do whatever they wished. Even with my recent $3 million contribution, I felt poor. I wrote some notes to focus on my next steps. Then I realized I was hungry. A good sign. I ate leftovers from last night, not wanting to waste good food. As I cleaned up, I realized this house reminded me too much of my past life. It had to change. That evening, I bought moving boxes and packing supplies and rented a trailer. I packed everything in Cheryl's room, amazed at how much stuff a 17-year-old could own. I packed her clothes and even her curtains. I dismantled her furniture and loaded it all, leaving behind only her cell phone and a philosophy book Wesley gave her, which she had hidden in the trash. I missed her terribly as I threw away the book with the trash. Once loaded, I realized Cheryl hadn't taken much from her old life, not even her laptop or calculators. I tried not to dwell on it, as thinking only brought pain. By midnight, Cheryl's room was empty, and I was exhausted. I slept in the guest bedroom, vowing never to sleep in the bed I shared with Sharon again. The next morning, I dealt with the essentials, trying to use up food before it spoiled. By mid-morning, I stored Cheryl's things in a rented unit, questioning why I kept them but unable to part with them. I felt differently about the rest of my family. Getting rid of their things would be easier. After returning the trailer, I looked at rental listings, and by the afternoon I signed a lease near my work. Not wanting to be alone, I ate out and watched movies until late. When I returned to the guest bedroom, I had a restless night, replaying the day's confrontations in my mind. I would have given anything to forget it. On Sunday morning, I made myself breakfast for the last time, packed my clothes and personal items, and moved them into my furnished apartment. It took 3 trips to transfer everything I wanted to keep. I deliberately left behind anything Sharon had bought. It felt right for my peace of mind and was part of my healing process. On Monday, I called my boss to ask for a week off due to urgent family matters. I had 6 weeks of vacation saved up, so it wasn't a problem. After my last breakfast at home, I contacted 3 organizations: Goodwill, the Salvation Army, and Habitat for Humanity. I explained that due to a family tragedy, I was giving away everything in the house on a first-come, first-served basis. I hoped they would clear out the house completely. Over 3 days, they took away all the furniture, appliances, and most of the clothes. I donated the remaining food to a local food bank. On Thursday, I hired a cleaning service to clear out anything left as trash. They cleaned the house thoroughly over 2 days. I also sold Sharon's car and made sure Cheryl's expensive Audi wasn't left behind. On Friday, a realtor inspected the house and put it on the market. I wanted a quick sale, so I told her to price it for that. I then canceled the service on their 4 phones and donated them to a domestic violence shelter. I kept Cheryl's phone, leaving it in my apartment. I decided against changing my number, wanting to be reachable if my kids ever needed me. Dismantling my old life was exhausting but cleansing. I spent the weekend on my couch watching TV to unwind. At dinner, I decided to listen to Cheryl's phone to feel connected to her. Sharon had erased most of the data, but missed a folder with Cheryl's favorite songs. As I played them, a recorded message from Cheryl came on. She said she loved me more than anything and was forced to ask Wesley to adopt her. She didn't want to leave me or our home, but felt she had to for reasons she couldn't explain in case her mom found out. Her message ended tearfully, reassuring me of her love. This reopened all my wounds, but also comforted me, knowing she still cared. Cheryl's courage and love gave me some peace, despite not knowing how she planned to fix things. I returned to work on Monday and shared my story with my colleague Robert during lunch. He had always been a supportive friend. He was shocked by Sharon's actions, but helped me handle the financial side of things after I received a $3 million payment. We discussed investments to minimize taxes and I took his advice on handling the house sale money to avoid capital gains tax. "Thanks to your advice, I'm handling things okay," I told him. He offered more help and invited me to dinner at his house, mentioning his wife, Doris, wanted me there. He joked about Doris's persistence when she set her mind to something, hinting it wasn't just about the food. "She's setting me up, isn't she?" "Oh, her sister Dawn will be there too. My wife wants to matchmake, and I'm not fond of the idea, but she won't stop until I agree to come to dinner." "Oh, I see," I chuckled. "You know I'm not interested in starting a new relationship. My last one left me quite changed. But before I claim a stomach bug to avoid it, what can you tell me about her?" "She's stunningly beautiful and works as a lawyer. She's divorced, doesn't have kids, and is a few years younger than you. Sounds perfect. But I feel like there's a catch." "You're right, Keith. I won't lie to you. She's been through a lot. Really struggled. She's been healing from her past for almost 2 years now. I've told Doris about what you've been through, and she thinks you both could help each other heal. You both were hurt and tricked. Honestly, it might not be a bad idea, but I don't like to meddle." Doris, however, isn't hesitant. "I don't want you to feel pressured because of me, Robert. If it makes you feel better, tell Doris I'll come this Saturday, but just this once, right? She won't try to set us up repeatedly?" "No, I'll make sure it's just this once. Doris will really have to persuade her to come at the same time as you, but I'm sure she will. If Dawn comes, I will be nothing but respectful. I already know this about you, Keith, which is why I trust you with my daughter-in-law. As for her story, I can't share that. It's hers to tell, just like Doris's, and I haven't shared your story either. We respect you both too much, but if you ask her politely, she might share it with you." "Okay, what time Saturday?" "At 6:30. And Keith, if you do this for me, I owe you one. Thanks for easing the pressure." He laughed. I was nervous about re-entering the dating scene. I don't know how she did it, but Doris convinced Dawn to come. We were introduced at the same time by Robert and Doris. She had a sweet girl-next-door vibe. During dinner, Doris and Robert asked questions that revealed interesting things about us, even though they already knew the answers. By the end of dinner, the awkwardness had faded. We realized we weren't so different, and nothing bad happened that night. The matchmakers had us sit and talk in the living room while they washed up, taking their time to give us space. "I hope I'm not the monster Robert and Doris painted me as," I joked. "And I hope you don't think I flew here on a broomstick," she quipped. "I could tell you about my job as a lawyer, but explaining patent law might bore you like watching paint dry." "My job as a rocket scientist isn't thrilling either with all the calculations," I replied. "Doris and Robert mean well. I'm sure they'll quiz us tomorrow about tonight." "Why don't we wait to report back until after we've had a real first date?" I suggested, hopeful. Her smile was all the answer I needed. "Would you pick me up at 10:30 a.m. tomorrow for church and then lunch?" she asked. Her request surprised me. Before meeting Sharon, I used to go to church quite regularly. Sharon's views led me away from it, but this invitation felt like a sign to return. We went to church together, and a familiar hymn played, reminding me of a man who wrote it after a tragedy but found peace. This song felt right, singing it among others. It marked the start of a wonderful friendship. We weren't ready for commitments due to our pasts, but as we dated, it felt exclusive. After a couple of months, I finally asked her if she felt the same. I knew we hadn't defined our relationship, but I wasn't pushing for anything. I could tell she wanted to open up about her own experiences. "Are you ready to share your story with me now?" she asked, looking into my eyes. I saw genuine concern in her gaze. "You first. If you share yours, I'll share mine," she suggested. I agreed and told her about my life with Sharon, up until the day she left me with the kids. That's why it's hard for me to trust again. Sharon really hurt me, and it's taken a lot to start healing. Dawn shared tears as I recounted my story, clearly moved. "That's terribly cruel," she said. "Sharon was wrong to use you like that." She expressed genuine sympathy for what I had been through. "You're helping me heal," I told her. "Now it's your turn to share." She took a deep breath, and I held her hand for support. She had been married to Rex for 11 years. They were happy at first, but issues arose regarding their intimacy. Rex wanted more than she could comfortably give. As their 10th anniversary approached, Rex suggested opening up their marriage, which led to a series of painful events. Dawn revealed that Rex had drugged her and forced her into situations with other men while recording it. These memories were clearly painful for her. She had tried to leave him after realizing what he was doing, but Rex became even more controlling and abusive. Eventually, she left him and filed for divorce, staying with her brother-in-law, Robert, who protected her from Rex. The divorce went through, but her struggles didn't end there. She later met Dustin through her job, and they quickly connected. Dustin was kind and seemed like everything Rex wasn't. They got engaged, but Rex wasn't done with her. He sabotaged the relationship by giving Dustin photos of a night that had occurred before she met him, leading Dustin to break off the engagement. Rex then revealed a twisted plan to keep controlling her life, showing up just as Dustin left to claim her back. He had orchestrated the whole night to break her and make her dependent on him. Dawn had been trapped in a nightmare orchestrated by Rex, but she found unexpected help from a woman who approached her at work, offering to meet over dinner to discuss something important. As Dawn finished her story, it was clear how much pain and betrayal she had endured. I felt a profound respect for her strength and resilience in facing such adversities. She handed me a memory stick, explaining it contained a recording of what had happened to me unedited. Rex, who was involved, accidentally gave an unedited version. The video showed that someone had put something in my drink, and the men were discussing how they had deliberately incapacitated me. The edited version had removed all such evidence and conversations. It also included Rex's threats to me. She mentioned she was divorcing her client because he had been unfaithful before, and she refused to stay married to someone who broke the law. I took the evidence to the district attorney who prosecuted them. Rex was sentenced to 12 years in prison and is still there. The others got slightly shorter sentences. These betrayals have marked me, but I refuse to let them define who I am. I won't become the person Rex wanted me to be. I saw how ashamed Dawn was to share such painful details of her past. Now I was the one crying for this kind woman who had suffered so much. I'm so sorry, Dawn. You didn't deserve what happened to you, just like I didn't deserve my own troubles. Now I understood why Robert and Doris said we were both broken souls. I was broken, but my faith was helping me heal and freeing me from my past. The right person will recognize my true value. I hope that day comes soon. She smiled as we wiped each other's tears. I hope so too, Dawn. As we grew closer, Dawn wanted to help me move past my history. I knew it was the right thing to do, even though it was hard. Dawn knew I admired the author C.S. Lewis, and she quoted him saying, "If you love deeply, you'll suffer greatly, but it's still worth it." I used to love Sharon and the kids deeply and would have done anything for them. But was it worth the pain? Despite wishing I had never met Sharon, I realized I had been happy throughout those years. Was it all a waste? Even though it was based on lies, I wasn't unhappy. I realized I was falling in love with Dawn. She never pressured me to forget my past, only wanted to help me heal. We connected on levels I'd never experienced with Sharon. Day by day, she broke down the walls I'd built around my heart. We talked openly about our feelings. This honesty was like a breath of fresh air for someone who felt like they were drowning. Dawn had been healing for 2 years and had already told me she loved me, a big step for her. One day she said, "Keith, I can show you the door to love, but you have to walk through it yourself." It reminded me of the saying, "When one door closes, another opens." She agreed, but reminded me, often we look so long at the closed door, we don't see the one that has opened. That was the moment I let go of my past. I didn't want to live trapped by old pain. I needed to trust Dawn as she had learned to trust me. I finally broke through the barriers holding me back and moved toward happiness confidently. From then on, it was Dawn and me all in. I was in love again and knew it. 5 months later, I proposed, and she said yes. We set our wedding date for 6 months later. Dawn helped me pick a house to start our life together. I invested all the money from selling my old house into our new home. We furnished it within 2 months. We decided to wait until our wedding night, which might seem old-fashioned, but it felt right to us. 4 months later, she'd almost moved in completely. She kept a few things at her apartment just for convenience. Life felt wonderful again until one Friday when I got a strange message from Dawn. "We have a reservation at the Carriage House restaurant tonight at 5:30. Leave work at 5 and you should make it on time. Don't be late. It's important. We had only been there once before. It was quite far, but the food was worth the drive. I wasn't sure why she was so insistent or what was so urgent. A bad feeling started to creep in. I tried to shake off the feeling of déjà vu. I messaged her for more details but got no reply. I tried calling, but it just rang out and my call was unanswered. I felt a wave of anxiety as I thought about Sharon's betrayal. Could I be facing another betrayal? As soon as it was 5 p.m., I rushed out of the office to meet Dawn. I got there 3 minutes early and saw Dawn already waiting at the table. Her smile eased my worries a bit. I joined her, eager to hear what she wanted to discuss. Let's order first, then we can talk without interruptions, Dawn suggested. She let me order first while she decided what she wanted. After I ordered, Dawn asked for a lot of food, enough for 2. I missed lunch and I'm really hungry, she said. Given the fancy restaurant, I hoped she could manage it all. Dawn seemed to check her watch frequently, but didn't explain why, which made me anxious. What's going on, Dawn? This feels like a setup. Are you planning to betray me like Sharon? Is someone else joining us for all this extra food? If so, I'm leaving now, I said suddenly. Just wait 2 more minutes, Keith, just 2, she urged. I promise it's worth it. You're about to be very surprised. I was struggling to keep calm, fearing another heartbreak. Dawn looked nervous, probably expecting my reaction to what was coming next. Then, someone approached from behind and sat down next to me. Hello, Father. It was Cheryl. I stood up, overwhelmed with emotion, and we hugged tightly, both of us crying. Dawn was also moved by our reunion. I realized the extra food Dawn ordered was Cheryl's favorite. I'm so glad to see you, Cheryl. I thought I might have lost you forever. And how do you know Dawn? I asked. Let me introduce you properly. Cheryl, this is Dawn Garrett, my fiancée. And Dawn, this is Cheryl, my daughter, I said. Actually, Dad, I never changed my last name. It's still Cheryl Carlisle, she clarified. What? But I thought you signed the adoption papers, I asked, shocked. I did sign, but when it came to the court decision, I told the judge I'd rather not live than be a Stanton. The judge believed me and let me keep my name, Cheryl explained. She continued, Mom and Wesley were furious. They threatened to disinherit me, but I didn't care. I love you more than anything, Dad. I was filled with pride at her bravery. But what about the restraining order? I don't want to get you in trouble, I asked. The restraining order was only for 30 days, Dad. Wesley was just trying to scare us, she explained. Then why didn't you contact me sooner? I pressed. I had to stay close to them to gather evidence against them. Also, they threatened to ruin you financially if I contacted you. I couldn't risk your safety, she said. Why now? What's changed? I asked. I'll give you the short version now, and Dawn will explain the rest, Cheryl said, surprising me that Dawn was involved. Yes, Dad. After we left, we moved to Dallas. I didn't enjoy living in a huge mansion with those two. Wesley helped me get a job at a company they owned a big part in. She started her story. At 17, I was already keeping my eyes and ears open to learn as much as I could about the business I was part of. Working full-time helped me stay under the radar. That summer, they focused on spoiling the twins, which seemed to annoy them. I started at Georgia Tech that fall and was excited, even though I was the youngest in all my classes. Thanks again, Dad, for your support. Wesley and Mom insisted I take my graduation gift, an Audi R8 GT, to college. I liked the car at first and grew really attached to it after we split up. I realized they used it to distract me and keep me happy. I quickly got used to it. Wesley brought it to me at Georgia Tech. Since the car was only in my name, I traded it at an Atlanta dealership for $220,000. I bought a 2-year-old Buick Encore for less than $25,000, leaving me with $195,000 for my expenses. I chose not to tell them what I did with the Audi. I also got a part-time job at a local Costco, which fit well with my class schedule. I didn't go back to Dallas for any holidays, using work as my excuse. They didn't want me working and offered to send money, but I said I'd donate it to charity if they did, because I wanted to earn my own money like Wesley was supposed to. They were upset that I didn't come home. The only time they insisted I come back was for an adoption hearing. They flew me back and forth on a corporate jet, and they were unhappy when I refused to change my last name after my first year of college. When summer came, I parked my car and they sent me back to Dallas. By then, I was 18 and had finished my first year of college. I asked to work as an assistant to Dave Wilkins, the director of projects at Clean ARD Pharmaceuticals. He was older, and we started dating, but I knew he was interested in me because I was the boss's daughter, and it could help his career. But don't worry, Dad. Although we kissed, I told him I didn't want to have sex before marriage. He agreed, probably to avoid upsetting Wesley. Bear with me, Dad. The interesting part is coming. 2 months into the summer, Dave and I were at his place having wine and watching a movie. He loved fine wines and kept offering me different ones to try. I pretended to enjoy them, but poured my glass out when he wasn't looking. He drank enough for both of us and got quite drunk. That's when I started asking him innocent questions about the company's drug development and approval processes. He felt safe talking to me, Wesley's daughter, and let slip that the company had altered trial data to get FDA approval. He didn't have the original data, but mentioned a former senior employee who was fired for trying to expose this. There was a legal settlement to keep it quiet. Wesley's parents were involved in covering it up. Eventually, Dave drunkenly mentioned the former employee's name, Hugh Collum. Dad, I've been using a phone finder app to keep track of you. I noticed you were spending time at an apartment rented to Dawn Garrett. Out of curiosity, I looked her up and found she was a lawyer specializing in drug patents. I called her and introduced myself. She knew about me from what you told her. I shared my story with her. Dawn then spoke up. Before you get upset, Keith, Cheryl hired me as her lawyer. Attorney-client privilege meant I couldn't tell you anything without risking my license, Cheryl added, and I didn't want to bring up painful memories until everything was resolved. Dawn continued, as a lawyer, I can find people through a private investigator. Within 2 days, I had Hugh Callum's file. He was wary because of a non-disclosure agreement, but showed it to me. He couldn't legally talk to me, but he could talk to Cheryl since she was an employee. Cheryl took over. He was relieved he could legally share his story without risking jail time. I was on edge thinking about Sharon's betrayal. Could it happen again? At 5 p.m., I hurried to meet Dawn. I got there early and found Dawn already at the table, smiling. Her smile calmed me down a bit. We sat down and she suggested ordering first so we could talk freely later. After I ordered, Dawn ordered a surprising amount of food. I missed lunch, I'm starving, she explained. We were in an upscale restaurant and I hoped she could finish it all. Dawn seemed anxious, checking her watch without explaining. Finally, I couldn't hold back my questions any longer. What's happening, Dawn? You're making me nervous. Are you planning something like Sharon did? Is someone else coming for the extra food? If so, I'm out of here, I said suddenly. Just give me 2 more minutes, Keith. I promise it's worth it, she reassured me. My nerves were frayed, fearing another betrayal. Dawn looked worried, probably guessing my thoughts. Then someone approached and sat next to me. Hello, Father. It was Cheryl, my daughter. Overwhelmed, I stood up and hugged her tightly. We both cried. Dawn was also touched by our reunion. It turned out the extra food was Cheryl's favorite. I'm so relieved to see you, Cheryl. I feared I'd lost you. How do you know Dawn? I asked. Let me introduce you properly. Cheryl, meet Dawn Garrett, my fiancée. Dawn, meet Cheryl, I said. Cheryl clarified, I never changed my last name, Dad. It's still Cheryl Carlisle. Confused, I asked, but didn't you sign the adoption papers? I did sign, but in court I told the judge I couldn't bear to change my last name. He let me keep it, Cheryl explained. She continued, Mom and Wesley were angry and threatened to disinherit me, but I stood my ground because I love you more than anything. Amazed by her bravery, I asked, what about the restraining order? I don't want you getting in trouble. It was only for 30 days, Dad. Wesley was just trying to scare us, she reassured me. Then why didn't you reach out sooner? I pressed. I had to stay close to them to gather evidence, and they threatened to ruin you if I contacted you. I couldn't let you get hurt because of me, she explained. Why now then? I asked. I'll give you a quick overview now, and Dawn will explain more, Cheryl said, surprising me that Dawn was involved. Yes, Dad, I'll start. After we left, we moved to Dallas. I wasn't happy there and got a job through Wesley at a company they owned a big stake in. She began her story. No, I'm not asking for anything for Wesley or myself. This is about the kids, Conrad and Jocelyn. They miss you and your eldest daughter. We'd like to meet you at Angus Steakhouse this Saturday at 6 p.m., our treat. Invite Cheryl if she's around. When you asked if Wesley, a Stanton, would be there, yes, he will be since he is their father. If he's there, I won't come. It's that simple. I forgot how dramatic you are, you said. I prefer being practical. If he's there, I'm not. We ended the call. Half an hour later, you called again. Please don't hang up. Wesley will stay away for the twins' sake. They really want to see you. Will you come now that you know he won't be there? I took a moment. You two are known liars. I don't trust you. I'll come. But if Wesley shows up, even for a second, I'm gone. Understood, you said. It's a pity you can't move past your ego. But okay, he won't be there. The kids are excited to see you. Will Cheryl be there? I asked. She's busy with exams and won't be in town, you replied. She's smart and I'm proud of her. See you Saturday, I said. Dawn thought Sharon had a hidden reason for contacting me, besides the twins' supposed eagerness to see me. I agreed and asked Dawn to come with me for support. At the steakhouse, Jocelyn and Conrad ran up to hug me. It seemed a bit staged, maybe because of our rough breakup. Hello, Keith, Sharon greeted us politely as the twins sat with their mother across from Dawn and me. Thanks for coming. The twins are happy to reconnect with you, she lied. Then Conrad and Jocelyn talked about their interests and how they missed me, hoping to keep in touch. They mentioned Cheryl, and I reassured them she missed them too. After we ordered, Sharon revealed why she really invited me. You might not know, but our family lost everything after some tough times. Wesley is back to illustrating children's books, and I'm waiting tables here, she explained, noting her employee discount let her afford tonight's dinner. I've seen the news, Sharon, but I'm sure I don't know everything. It must be hard losing all you worked for, I said with a hidden meaning. She glanced at me but didn't respond. Our biggest worry is paying for Conrad and Jocelyn's college, she continued. You saved for their education just like Cheryl's, and with your $3 million severance, you could easily help them like you helped Cheryl. They aren't eligible for scholarships due to their grades. Keith, isn't it time to put the past behind and help these great kids? I know you still care about them, she pressed. Dawn squeezed my hand. Knowing I was close to losing my temper, I wanted to unload on Sharon, but not in front of the kids. She probably brought them to keep me calm. I paused, gathering my thoughts. Sharon thought I was considering her words. I didn't look at her or the twins. I looked at Dawn, seeking her support. She nodded, reassuring me. Whatever you decide, I'm with you, Dawn said. Sharon brightened when Dawn seemed to agree. Taking a deep breath, I was ready to respond. You're right, Sharon. I still care about them, even if they cut me off. But I won't just hand over help. If I support them, there will be 4 strict conditions. First, both you and Wesley must give up all parental rights and transfer both children to me for $1 each. This is crazy, Sharon exclaimed, struggling to stay calm. They're almost adults. What difference does it make? Wesley will never agree to this, but out of curiosity, what are your other conditions? Second, both children will move in with Dawn and me and stay at our house until they finish college. Third, they can study whatever they want, except philosophy. If either wants to study philosophy, they'll have to pay for it themselves. Finally, they can't have any contact with you or Wesley until they graduate. I'll let you both attend their graduation, but if either of you contacts them before then, or they contact you, the deal is off. The funding will stop. Yes, they'll be adults at 18 and can make their own decisions, but if they contact you, the funding stops immediately. That's all the conditions. Take it or leave it. To hell with you, Keith. You can keep your fancy philosophy and your money. My children won't bow to your ridiculous demands. You manipulated me like a violin for 17 years, Sharon. Never again. Dawn is my life now. Jocelyn, Conrad, I still love you both. I wish you the best for the future. I stood up from the table, losing my appetite. I left a $100 bill for our meals and walked out without another word. 3 weeks later, Sharon called. Hi, Keith. We've talked a lot about your proposal, and maybe we can agree on everything except the no-contact rule. It's going to be hard not seeing them for 4 or 5 years after being with them every day since they were born. Can you remove that condition, or at least allow some limited contact during this time without affecting their funding? Hello, Sharon. I didn't expect you to call. That no-contact rule is the most important to me. I think it's best they completely break away from your influence. No contact at all, Sharon. As I said, take it or leave it. She hung up. 2 weeks later, she called again, sounding defeated. Hello, Keith. I hate to admit this, but you win. We love our kids more than our pride. We'll accept your terms to ensure their well-being until they graduate from college. When do you want them to move in with you? Let them finish this school year. I'll come the day after their last day to pick them up. They can use the summer to adjust to the new situation. They won't need anything from us after graduation. Can we handle the paperwork at our place? It's embarrassing enough without doing it in a public office. I held back from reminding her of the humiliation they put me through. Dawn is a notary, but she can't notarize for her husband. I'll arrange for another notary to come over when I pick them up. They can bring whatever they want with them. I'll take care of everything from then on. Make sure Conrad and Jocelyn sign the adoption papers in front of the judge. If they convince him they want to be adopted, the deal stands. If not, they come back to you without the tuition funding. We understand, Keith. The kids know what they need to do. I still hate you for this, she added. I know, Sharon. I'm okay with that. A week after the local school graduation, Sharon called tearfully to say I could finalize the paperwork. Don knew a bank tellery who was also a notary. We paid him extra to meet us at their apartment to sign the documents. We got there early to go over the paperwork. Like Sharon, Wesley looked beaten. They quickly realized their dream lifestyle was over. We had 2 standard forms for waiving parental rights, allowing me to adopt and change their last names back to Carlisle. The third document was a bit spiteful. It stated they were selling their rights to their children for $1 each. It had no legal weight, but I wanted it after they forced me to pay so much before. The agreement clearly stated that the twins should not contact us unless they graduate from college. I explained what breaking this rule would mean for them. Wesley asked, "What if something serious happens, like one of Sharon's parents gets sick or worse? Can't there be exceptions?" "If something that serious happens, you can contact me and I'll decide if it's important enough to pass on," I assured him. They both looked sad when the notary came to make it official. It was a quick, quiet process. After signing, I handed the documents to Dawn for safekeeping. I helped Sharon and Wesley load their bags into the car as they said their tearful goodbyes to the kids. On the drive home, the kids were quiet but clearly upset. Before we got out of the car, Conrad said, "If you loved us, you wouldn't make everything so dramatic." "It's because I love you that I did this. Maybe one day you'll understand," I hoped. "What should we call you?" they asked. "Something respectful. You don't have to call me Dad anymore. Keith or Sir is fine, and you can call Dawn Dawn or Mrs. Just be respectful," I said. They nodded. Nothing confrontational was said after that. They were excited to see Cheryl again. Jocelyn picked the room next to hers, and Conrad chose one further down the hall. I knew they might want some space due to my meddling, but I hoped funding their education would eventually help stabilize things. At dinner, I told them Cheryl would take them to see a psychiatrist weekly. This was to help them deal with their recent life upheavals. I knew it wouldn't be easy for the psychiatrist, Dr. Percy Edgerton, whom I chose based on good reviews. I pushed to start the adoption process soon so they'd have time to settle before meeting with the judge. The adoption went smoothly, and the kids cooperated. I didn't tell Sharon about the proceedings, thinking it best she didn't know. I got new ID cards for Conrad and Jocelyn with their new last names. Initially, they just called me Sir. Cheryl still called me Daddy, but didn't push them to do the same. Adjusting to this new family dynamic took time for all of us, going from living alone to having Cheryl and then the twins in the house. I decided they should continue therapy through their first 2 college years. They switched to a new psychiatrist near Georgia Tech, recommended by Dr. Edgerton, but they kept seeing him too. Thanks to Cheryl's influence, and despite Sharon and Wesley's past actions, both twins chose to study at Georgia Tech. Conrad picked aerospace engineering, and Jocelyn chose chemical engineering. By the end of their first year, Jocelyn started calling me Daddy again. Conrad eventually did too, just before the next school year began. Dawn adapted well to a busy household, using her organizational skills to manage everything lovingly. The kids grew to respect and care for her, politely calling her Dawn or Yes, ma'am. Regular therapy was a good decision. The best decision was marrying Dawn. When Cheryl graduated with her engineering degree, she got a job at Aerojet Rocketdyne, quickly fitting in and starting to date a fellow engineer, Rory Shepard. Years later, Wesley and Sharon joined us in Atlanta for the twins' graduation. It was a moment for everyone to reconnect. After the ceremony, Conrad and Jocelyn thanked me for all my help. "We couldn't have done this without you," they said. "I was proud of them and glad I could support their growth. You and Cheryl were our solid foundation before they left. Mom and Dad really pushed for us to study philosophy and follow in their footsteps. We weren't interested in it, so we're grateful you stopped that. What really surprised us was how you stepped back and let us choose our own paths, promising to support whatever careers we decided on. You have no idea how much that meant to us. You were the same dad we've always known and loved. You always supported us, never pressured us, and while you pursued your own dreams, you gave us the space to chase ours. You're the best dad in the world," Jocelyn added. "That's why we chose the paths we did, inspired by you. With my degree in chemical engineering, I'm hoping to land a job at Aerojet Rocketdyne working on new chemical rocket engines. And considering how much Conrad talks about aerospace engineering, we're hoping to add 2 more Carlyles to their team. There are 2 things you haven't asked yet, Dad, but we know you're wondering. First, no, we're not changing our last names back to Stanton. We're proud to be your kids, both legally and emotionally. Second, our home is where you are. When we come back, we'd like to keep living with you in our family home until we start our own lives. We're not going back to live with Mom and Wesley. We'll see them sometimes now that we've got our degrees, but you will always be our dad. We hope that's okay with you." I was so moved, nearly to tears, not knowing how they would feel about me now that Wesley and Sharon were back in their lives. But I was relieved, and I started crying. I wasn't the only one crying. Dawn and I hugged them both in a big family embrace. Eventually, Cheryl's name did change. 9 months later, I proudly walked Cheryl down the aisle when she married Rory Shepard. They made a lovely couple. I felt that soon Dawn and I might become grandparents. Yes, Wesley and Sharon were there, but they didn't dare suggest Wesley walk her down the aisle. I love this girl so much. The wedding was perfect, with Conrad as Rory's best man and Jocelyn as maid of honor. 2 years later, Jocelyn eloped to marry her fiancé, Carl. "Dad, Mom and Dad insisted he walk me down the aisle instead of you. They said it was only fair since you walked Cheryl," she explained. "Honey, whatever you choose, I'm okay with it. It's your wedding and it should go how you want," I told her. "You're right, Dad. What I wanted most was peace, so running away with Carl made that choice unnecessary. I still love you, Dad. And I still love you, Jocelyn. If you or Carl ever need anything, I know, we'll call you," she replied playfully but affectionately. Wesley and Sharon stayed together, but Sharon was unhappy due to their constant financial struggles, which also made Wesley unhappy. I wasn't surprised when Conrad offhandedly mentioned that Wesley and Sharon were having affairs as a way to cope with their sadness. Their pragmatic approach led them to see other partners as a practical solution, considering their life philosophy. After all, Sharon had been with me for 17 years as my lawful wife. None of the children could understand how they lived like this, but I was proud to be a role model for them. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.